So I'm Scott Jerome. I'm a graduate student here in a PhD program in biochemistry, and I am a GMRA graduate mentor, and I've been asked to give you a little presentation on proposal and grant writing, and this will be, a synopsis and an overview, and you're going to get other information, I'm sure, from your mentors, from your advisor. Professors, at least you should. So just use this, excuse me, as a starting point on how you want to proceed, and certainly go to other resources, of course. So how many people in here have written proposals yet? So pretty much everybody? Okay. So some of this will be a little redundant, but I think it's always good to go over the basics, and it's always a good place to begin. So how many people have seen one of these before from BLAST? Either URE or Scholar. Okay, so what they're after. But anytime that you write a proposal, the reason I put this up here is just anytime you write a proposal, you want to be very clear on what the governing body or the granting body is asking for. And you want to address those specific questions. Nothing, I think, turns off a reviewer more is when they see a cookie cutter copy of a proposal that's gone to 6 different places that's just generic and doesn't address the questions that they want addressed in the format that they want to see it. So make sure that you're you're a stickler for all of the instructions you receive anytime that you're writing for a grant or writing a proposal. And just, with BLAST in this situation, they're looking at, it's going to be ranked on the scientific merit, the training opportunity and mentoring plan, biomedical or One Health relevance, GPA, and written quality. So not only do you want to hit, everything they ask from a technical side, but also, pay attention to how they're going to be gauging it. And if you have the greatest proposal in the world that you think is the greatest proposal in the world, and you have typos, and your sentence structure is poor, and you can't write a paragraph, it doesn't matter. So you really need to make sure that if you're weak in some area, that you get help in that area. So the basics. The elements of the research proposal. So the research question, and that's obviously what you come up with, or your advisor and you come up with together, or sometimes it's what an advisor or a mentor gives to you, and then you need to come up with a proposal. So obviously you need to start with that research question. There will be aims and objectives within the proposal that are pretty specific. What is it that you're trying to accomplish? You might be studying, some sort of, mast cells or something, and your objective is not to cure cancer. I mean, it may overall you want to be in that ballpark with what you're doing is to help with that, but your objective is to look at, what mast cells do when you expose it to dihydrogenase or something. So make sure that you're really specific in your proposal about what the aims and objectives are of that specific project. The methodology, of course, is critical. Is this thing that you're doing, is it viable? Are you able to, demonstrate in the lab that this is, something that can be reproduced by another research team? And so, you need to also rationalize why you're using those methods. And a lot of that comes from the literature, what's been used in the past that's been effective. But also there's room for innovation, but you need to, if you have an innovative technique that you want to use, you have to back that up with literature. You have to back it up with, where a hole in the methods exists and how you're going to fill that hole with your new method. And also, you need to give rationale and back it up with the science that this is going to work. So there's obviously room for innovation, but from what I've seen with proposal writing, a lot of it, they just want little bits of innovation. They don't want you to go out too far on a limb. They want incremental steps along the way. And of course, you need to have in your mind the ethical considerations if you're using humans, if you're using animals, vertebrates, you know, there's ethical considerations, and you have to, if you are using those things, you have to go through either the IRB or IACUC and gain approval before you begin your project. So just some bullets on good research proposals. They connect with current literature. That's something that reviewers like to see, that you are well versed in the literature and you can show to them how this is filling a hole that exists in the literature, or how the current literature dovetails in with your project. That they're thought out, timely, and realistic. So if you're applying for, you know, a year project, you know, and realistically, you know, it's going to take you 3 years to get this thing done. You know, you need to, something's got to give in that situation. So you got to be realistic with your time. And you want to make sure that you talk about your strengths and weaknesses, and be forthright with, you know, anything that's a weakness within your proposal, because most oftentimes they're going to find that one way or the other. So if you come up, you know, it's, you know, the drawbacks of this procedure are these, and these, but this is why I feel it's the best in this situation. So making sure you go over those up front, and of course they're ethical. So the title, you know, title is something that's kind of funny, because you ever read those titles that are like 3 lines long on a research paper, and it's pretty tough just to get through it, and maybe you don't even have a clear understanding what they're really going after with the title. Those are problematic. I know that they're still out there, but they're problematic. And especially for a younger researcher, you want to be succinct with your title, and you want to be able to, the reader should know exactly what they're getting into when they read that title. And don't try to express everything. Just, you know, get right to the point of what you're trying to do. Aims and objectives, we've talked a little bit about that, but general to specific. So, you know, your introductory paragraph can really capture the reader's attention, get them excited about what you're trying to do, and then you bring them down to the specific aim. You know, so you can start with cancer as a whole and how many people it affects worldwide, and, you know, and why, you know, melanoma affects this many people, and then scale it down how the mast cells affect melanoma, and then my project is addressing this regarding mast cells. So, you know, bring it, you know, top of the funnel, and then narrow it down to your aims and objectives. The intro, obviously, I just mentioned, explain what the topic is and the relevance and importance of the topic. And that's really important as well. You know, why is this adding to the literature? You know, what's significant about this project? And then background is helpful. A lot of people that are reading your proposals may not be experts in your area. In fact, they may be lay people that aren't in the sciences. And they might be from another part of the university, as with IRB and IACUC. And so, you know, you want to give them background information that is, you know, just enough to cover the topic well, but not so much that they get bored with going through a history of mast cells. Research and design and methodology. Okay, so we talked a little bit about that already. And again, stressing, you know, what are the strengths and weaknesses of your project, and why you chose a particular method. And that may simply be because, you know, this is standard operating procedure of, you know, science in this field. This is, you know, how we do things in this field. And then have the literature to back it up, you know, cite the references on that. And then with the conclusion, you know, summing up your, you know, it's easy to say, but summing up everything you've written in the previous 4 or 5 paragraphs, and making it succinct and to the point. You know, you don't have to go through everything again, but, you know, this nice conclusion that wraps it all up, and you can use your introduction as a model. Don't have to be so specific because you have introduced it, but again, use that funnel approach. You know, we have this problem, you know, literature says we're doing this about it, and we want to add to it by doing our experiment on mast cells or whatever it is. So all of you have probably written specific aims if you've written proposals, but these are just a couple that I wrote that I'm not saying they're the best, but they seem to get the job done. So specific aim 1 in this study was compare cytokines IL-6 and TNF in trained collegiate endurance athletes and sedentary college students. And after the specific aim, I just go through and briefly outline, what these things are and what they do. And again, in number 2, compare vitamin D levels in trained collegiate endurance athletes and sedentary college students. And again, briefly go through, citing references, what these things are and what they do. And so it's easy for someone to read and understand, okay, now I know the significance of vitamin D in an exercising muscle. That's why this student wants to look at vitamin D here. So these are some of the questions you want to go through and ask yourself. But always go back to the beginning, like, what am I trying to accomplish with this project? What is the significance of it? And if you can't answer that question, it's really no use going any further. So you really have to know for yourself. And if you don't, talk to your advisor or your mentor and really figure out why you've been asked to do such and present a proposal on it. And you need to be, you're going to be the expert on this project. Like, there shouldn't be anybody who knows more about this project than you when it's done. And so you really have to feel confident in it and be able to explain it well and cover all of these questions. Why am I using this methodology? Why is it significant? How will the results be evaluated? What kind of stats program am I going to use? What resources will I use to evaluate that? And have an idea with your project, like even going all the way to the end, like who's going to help me with the writing of the manuscript? Who's going to be an editor for me? Like, if you think about all of that ahead of time as you're writing the proposal, it makes it much easier than getting to the end of the semester when you're trying to get it in and you haven't really thought about, okay, now I got all this data, what do I do? So plan the whole thing out, even if it's not for the project, just for yourself. And one really good thing to do is put a timeline on your project. And it can be flexible. You can adjust dates, but just ideas of target dates that you want to have in your mind or on paper that you can complete your work by. So I will have all of my samples collected by this date. We're going to run all of the assays by this date. I'm going to talk to my advisor here, and I'm going to talk to Andre about the statistics on this date. And then I'll be in a position to begin writing my manuscript by this date, and then I'll be able to turn it in by whatever date it is. If you have that written down, it's much easier, excuse me, I got a bit of a cold, to hold yourself accountable to those, to that timeline. So yeah, just sort of going on what I was just saying, being able to be a manager of the project is really important. And this is something that they don't teach a lot that I have found, as far as they being, the professors and everybody sort of above us. But about budgeting and your timeline and resources, managing those things and getting it done. There's always this drive to get the money and drive to get the project approved, but you really have to have a clear path on how you're going to get it completed. And then when you think about the sustainability, is this going to end at the end of the semester? Is another researcher going to carry it on? And that will have impact if you're going through IRB or IACUC. With passing confidential information, for example. And then how you're going to disseminate the information. And that's another thing you want to put in your timeline, is have a plan on what you're going to do once you're done. Like, it's not, science is for sharing, and you want to make sure that you have a plan for poster presentations, oral presentations, and anytime somebody gives you the opportunity, take it. Make sure that you take all of those opportunities, even if it's just a professor asks you to come in for one-day lecture for 20 minutes on your project. That's all good practice for, when you're giving a much larger presentation later on. So make sure that you take advantage of all of those resources. So, research or topic. And this is really, this is something obvious. We all know this. But, some people create a project and then find literature to support what they're doing. They'll create this great thing that they think is great, and then they'll go out and find, okay, this sort of supports it on this side, and this guy, in 1968 said this, that supports it on this side. And that's one way of doing it, but it's probably not a great way. The better way is to review the literature and find where the gap is in the literature and come up with your question. Something that after reading, quite a few papers on your topic, you can, well, they always seem to be leaving, TNF out of this conversation. They never bring this up as part of the equation. And then, so I have a question about TNF, and that's where I want to, begin my project. And so use the literature to form your question. Don't just go in with a statement and then try to get the literature to support your statement. And of course, talk to experts in the field. That's obvious as well. Your advisors, and they're the ones that have gone through the ringer, and you want to make sure that you get their input. And they may say, this has been tried. I know you haven't really seen it in the literature, but this thing's been tried and tried and tried, and it's pretty much a dead end. You might want to go in this direction. Or if you're stubborn, you might say, well, if it's been tried and tried, I want to try it again and see if we can come out with this different, methodology that we're using. But use your advisor and your mentors. So think about when you've selected your topic, think about the significance of this. Think about, is it something that is worthy of being, and I know this is a little bit, this may not be a great way to think about it, but is it worthy of being publishable? Like, is this something that's going to add to science? Is this something that people will be interested in because it's going to add to the body of work? And that's not to say that, some projects, they may never get published and they're still valuable, but, think about the significance in the sense of science significance, and, and help dictate what you're doing. Limitations of the proposal. Like, is it realistic? You want to, sample harbor seals. Is it realistic for you to get a grant with enough money that will allow you to go down and sample harbor seals? And what, if you really are interested in harbor seals, what other options do you have? Are there samples that exist that you can work with, out of some sort of library? So really, you need to think big, but also we have limitations with time and money that you need to adhere to. And then also the implications of the study. And that is a little bit with significance, but is this going to, even if you don't see what you expect to see, will this have some sort of significance? And that, things that don't always go the way you think it are going to go in the lab, as might be, that might be a good thing. And it might be significant because you didn't see certain results. So, but think about those implications of the research before you begin. So, I won't go through all of this, but this is a pretty good guide. Are your goals SMART? So specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. Basically what we've been talking about, that, are these things something that is specific enough to put into a single sentence for your, specific aims? Are they measurable? Can you go in the lab or out in the field and record the data effectively? Is it attainable? Especially with timelines that you have. Relevant, is it going to add to the body of work, add to literature? And timely, is this something that is, as far as the research that's being done around you, is this something that's timely with what you're doing? Pretty much, what we've been talking about. And that concise conclusion, I don't think can be overstated. I mean, all of it, of course, is important, but making sure that you have a way to bring it all together at the end for that reader to really, okay, I've read through this, and they, people's mind wander a little bit through the middle of that paragraph or, 4 paragraphs, but when you bring it all back in so that the reader has a clear picture of what you're doing and why you're doing it, and that's the last thing that they finish with, is that clear picture, that really helps a lot. And of course, edit and proofread your work. And I can't state that enough. I mean, the best writers, make mistakes, and, they read something 6 times and they start, reading over that typo they've made and it looks normal to them. So have somebody else read it. One of your fellow students is always good. And I know that can be hard sometimes to have another student read your work, but it's really important and it's good for them too. And then have a graduate student or professor proofread it, because catching those little things, hopefully you caught in the big ones, but catching those little things, can make a good proposal great. It can really make it over the top. So again, with technical writing skills, getting to the point we've talked about, but that's really important, that you don't ramble on with a lot of extra information that's not necessary for the proposal. It may be interesting information, but make sure you stay on point to what you're trying to let your audience know. Know your audience. I mean, that's something that I mentioned. You might find out ahead of time, if you can, if it's going to be all PhDs reading this, or if there's a mixture of graduate students and professors reading it, or if there's lay people on the committee. So if you can figure out who's going to be reading this, that can help you tailor your proposal. Obviously, proofread your work.